The video that follows was designed and scripted by 3 students in Year 11, 4 students in Year 11. Welcome to the video. Today we will be taking you through a step-by-step guide on how to revise for the English Language Paper 1, Question 4. For this activity you will need the following: 1 pen, 2 or 3 highlighters, a text, which is the Empire of the Sun text, 2 pieces of lined paper, and a quiet working environment. Pause if you need to get the equipment, and if you need a paper you need to ask your teacher. You need to read through the extracts slowly. You might want to pause the video while you read, or I will read it to you. It's 1941 World War II. Schoolboy Jim lives with his family in Shanghai, China, when it is overrun by the Japanese army. As Jim and his family attempt to escape by car, the Japanese army blows up a British Navy ship, the HMS Petrel, in Shanghai harbour. Jim's father tries to rescue the burning sailors from the sinking ship. The cloud of burning oil from the Petrel crossed the bay and enveloped the stalled traffic and the advancing Japanese. As Jim wound up his window, the Packard was thrown forward and then shaken violently from side to side. Broken glass fell from the windshield and showered the seats. Jim lay on the rear floor of the passenger cabin as the door pillar struck his mother's head. "Jamie, get out of the car! Jamie!" Dazed, she opened her door and stepped onto the road, taking her handbag from the swaying seat. Behind them, the Japanese tank was forcing its way past the Lincoln Zephyr abandoned by the Chinese dancers. The metal tread crushed the rear fender around its wheel and then rammed the heavy car into the back of the Packard. "Get up, Jamie, we're going home." A hand to her bruised face, his mother was pulling at the warped rear door. The tank stopped before making a second pass at the Lincoln. Japanese Marines moved between the cars and rickshaws, lunging with their bayonets at the crowd. Jim climbed onto the front seat and opened the driver's door. He jumped into the road and ducked below the shafts of a rickshaw laden with rice bags. The tank moved forward, smoke throbbing from its engine vents. Jim saw his mother pushed into the throng of Chinese and Europeans whom the Marines were forcing across the road. A second tank followed the first. Then a line of camouflaged trucks packed with Japanese soldiers. A final rifle shot rang out from the USS Wake. The last of the wounded British sailors were pulled onto the mudflat below the road. Oil leaking from the swamped Petrel lay in an elongated slick across the river, calming this place of battle. The British civilians who had helped to rescue the sailors sat in their greasy shirt sleeves beside the wounded men. Jim's father was dragging the injured petty officer onto the mudflat. Exhausted, he lost his grip and collapsed in a shallow stream that ran through the oily bank from a sewer vent below the pier. The Japanese soldiers on the road were driving the crowd away from the quay, forcing the Chinese and Europeans to step from their cars and rickshaws. Jim's mother had disappeared, cut off from him by the column of military trucks. A wounded British sailor, a sandy-haired youth no more than 18 years old, climbed the steps from the landing stage, hands outstretched like bloody ping-pong bats. Straightening his school cap, Jim darted past him and the watching coolies. He ran down the steps and jumped from the landing stage onto the spongy surface of the mudflat. Sinking to his knees, he waded through the damp soil towards his father. "We brought them out. Good lad, Jamie." His father sat in the stream, the body of a petty officer beside him. He'd lost his spectacles and one of his shoes, and the trousers of his business suit were black with oil, but he still wore his white collar and tie. In one hand, he held a yellow silk glove like those Jim had seen his mother carrying to the formal receptions at the British Embassy. Looking at the glove, Jim realised that it was the complete skin from one of the petty officer's hands, boiled off the flesh in an engine room fire. "She's going." His father flicked the glove into the water like the hand of a tiresome beggar. A hoarse, throttling explosion sounded across the river from the capsized hull of the Petrel. There was a violent rush of steam from the risen decks, and the gunboat slipped below the waves. A crowd of frantic smoke seethed across the water, surging about as if hunting for the vanished craft. Jim's father lay back against the mud. Jim squatted beside him. The noise of the tank's engines on the road, the shouted commands of the Japanese NCOs, and the drone of the circling aircraft seemed far away. The first debris from the Petrel was reaching them, life jackets and pieces of planking, a section of canvas awning with its trailing ropes that resembled an enormous jellyfish dislodged from the deep by the sinking gunboat. A flicker of light ran along the quays like silent gunfire. Jim lay down beside his father. Drawn up above them on the road were hundreds of Japanese soldiers. Their bayonets formed a palisade of swords that answered the sun. So once you've done this, read through the question carefully and make sure that you understand what it is telling you to do. In this example, it says, focus this answer on the part of the source from line 27 to the end. A reader having read this section of the text said, the writer effectively presents a sense of panic and horror here. To what extent do you agree? In your response, you could consider your impressions of the scene and characters, evaluate how the writer creates an impression of panic and horror, and support your opinions with quotations from the text. So, the important things: focus this answer from lines 27 to the end of the extract. Also consider your impressions of the scene and characters. Identify the key words in the question. Make sure you don't go off task when answering, so circle the keywords, which are panic and horror. This will help you a lot throughout the question because it will remind you to keep on task and keep answering the right question. Now the question on the screen will tell you to go to lines 27 to the end. This is the piece of the extract that we will be looking at for this question, so make sure you highlight line 27 so you don't accidentally go back. For the next step, we will show you how to highlight the text. In red, we've highlighted the way the actions of the soldiers create panic and horror. In yellow, we've highlighted the use of disgusting detail. You can do the same. Thirdly, in green, we've highlighted the actions of the sinking ship that creates a sense of panic and horror. The next step is to write your paragraphs. If you need a little bit of help, there is a bingo card that you can use. The way the card works is you pick a row and follow the sentence structure to form your paragraph. This is our guideline example of what you need to do in the actual question. You cannot copy this example, but you can use it to help what you are doing. So here is ours. I agree with the statement because the writer creates an impression of panic by the actions of the Japanese soldiers. For example, when they were driving the crowds away and forcing them. The verbs here show how aggressive they are, implying the people are out of control and panicking. We are also told that the soldiers shouted commands, which implies their power over everyone else. The fact that the writer tells us there were hundreds of Japanese soldiers creates an impression of panic because it is as if they were overwhelming the place. The palisade of their bayonets creates panic because it implies that they will stab the people. On this slide is our marking of our model paragraph that we've just shown you. The mark scheme is referring to the question, which is in green, the quotations, which are in blue, and finally the analysis, which is in red. For the second paragraph, you can start with this sentence starter. I agree with the statement because the writer creates impressions of horror because of upsetting details offered by the writer. Here's our example. For example, hands outstretched like bloody ping-pong bats. This implies he is so injured that his hands aren't as normal as they should be. The adjective bloody creates the imagery of horror because of how much pain he is in and how nobody would like to look that way. Another reason for why I agree with this statement is the use of horrible details. The complete skin from one of the petty officer's hands boiled off the flesh in an engine room fire. This suggests how horrible everything is and how traumatized they are by what they are experiencing. The word complete shows how much pain there is, the verb boiled shows how they are in extensive pain, and the noun flesh shows how deep the wounds are. On this slide is our marking of our second model paragraph. Again, the mark scheme is referring to the question in green, quotations in blue, and finally the analysis in red. This is the last paragraph that you will need to write, and there's also a sentence starter for this one, which is, lastly, I agree with the statement because. Make sure that you stick to what the question is asking you, because on this last bit, it's very easy to duplicate quotations. Read the question again very carefully and what it is asking you. Here's ours. Lastly, I agree with the statement because the writer creates impressions of panic because of the description of the sinking ship. For example, the quotation, frantic smoke settled across the water, creates the impression of panic for the people inside because they are now submerged underwater without any way out of there. The adjective frantic has connotations of chaos, which is taken by the smoke which is surging about as if hunting for the vanished craft. Another reason for why I agree that panic is created is by the situation the injured people are in. The lexical choice shouted implies that they are being forced, and also the verb forcing suggests that they are uncomfortable and creates a sense of panic. Also, the lexical choice commands suggest to us as a reader that they are being made to do their actions. The last quote, palisade of swords, implies that they are surrounded and intimidated, which even makes the reader feel panicked and makes the people in the extract traumatised. Again, here is our marking. The mark scheme is referring to the question in green, quotations in blue, and analysis in red. This is your final checklist that you need to use when you finish all 3 paragraphs. The checklist is green, referring to the question, blue, quotations, and red, analysis. These are things that you do not want in your paragraphs, also known as the naughty list. These are writing the wrong question, using incorrect quotations, and finally repeating what the quote says in your own words. Thank you for listening to our wonderful exotic PowerPoint on how to be brilliant by Charlie Lovell, Connor Townsend and Declan Wasty. Good luck.